Okay, welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. Jacob Dahlin, your host. Today we have a new guest, Joacim Theander. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Scandlux, your home for Scandinavian luxury products for the U.S. market. You can find us at scandlux.com.
So,
Delighted to be here.
So of course we have to use the Swedish nickname. So Jocke. So in the past we've had Dagge, Mange. Now we have Jocke on.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. So so before we get into kind of the introduction, you're sitting in your home gym tell us where you're at.
No, I was actually sitting in my work gym.
In your work gym.
This is my practitioner part. I have my massage bank behind me, and you can see kind of the weights in the background.
Yes.
So I'm at the office in Helsingborg in southern Sweden.
So for you that don't know Helsingborg, part of this podcast is also a geographical lesson for all North Americans about Sweden, and we try to get different people on. Helsingborg is north of Ramlösa.
Yeah, it is. It actually is. Yeah.
I have to. That was my first. I had to kind of look because I've been gone from Sweden for 25 years, and I knew where Helsingborg was, but when I popped it up on Google Maps and I saw, Ramlösa, which I didn't know was an actual. For you that don't know, Ramlösa is a popular carbonated water, I guess you would call it, in Sweden that everybody drinks.
Yeah.
So anyway, but when I think of Helsingborg, I think the most closest city of Sweden to Denmark. That's what I think of.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The bond and the proximity to Denmark is really it's noticeable when you're here. Definitely.
Yeah. Of course, you could tell that I left before the bridge was built between Malmö and Copenhagen.
Yeah. I've been here all the time.
Yeah. So let's get started, because the reason why I wanted to have you on, your background in strength and conditioning and within the junior hockey and hockey world, it's about the off ice and the main topic that I wanted to talk about today is really how do you build the athlete away from the ice, and how important is that? And just to give you a little perspective and a little background of I grew up as a kid watching the evolution of the new athlete within the outside of hockey, really, and that was more of athletes like Gunde Svan. I think I mentioned that on a previous episode, that I thought was really eye-opening about not just being a good athlete, but what else, how do you become a pro in the training, the recovery, and the fuel component of it. So you've put out some simple but really poignant articles on LinkedIn, and I wanted to talk about your philosophy and your background with that too. So tell us a little bit about your background, because you've been working within hockey and outside of hockey for a number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out as a personal trainer back in, I think I got my license in 2010, and started working at a commercial gym. And I did that for quite a while. So I didn't get into training athletes for the first 5 years. So the first 5 years I just had like regular mortal clients training. And the thing that I kind of noticed there was that I came to a point where I started giving people training programs or templates where we did changes more for the sake of change than that we were actually heading somewhere. I'm not particularly good at sales, so in order to kind of make a living, I needed to create results that kind of spoke for themselves. So I started just poking around the internet and just trying to find good sources of information. And I ran into this site called Starting Strength with a quite controversial texter named Mark Rivito. And the thing with him is that he had a way of explaining barbell training to me that really resonated with me. And even though he hasn't got all the answers, it was a good start to go. But I could see that after working from his philosophies and what he was thinking about training for a couple of years, I did solve a lot of problems during that time. But there were also problems that wasn't solvable and that kind of sometimes got worse. So I started kind of reaching out and looking to how could we kind of fix weird movements, pain, and stuff. When I was getting my personal training license back in 2010, the definition I was given then was personal trainers, they train healthy people that function, and physios, they train the sick and bad people. And the problem is that we don't have too many healthy, functional people. Most people have some ailments, or they have pain and disruptive moving patterns and so on. So I started kind of looking at how I could kind of fix the errors that barbell training could not do. So my philosophy was like I quite early picked up that most physical performance, or all physical performance, is kind of is a derivative of strength, if you might say. So if you're strong enough, you will be able to handle most of the stuff that life kind of throws at you. So I had to kind of reconsider that. So I started kind of dabbing in foam rolling and active release techniques and stuff like that. I tried a lot of different stretching techniques, and none of that kind of worked. I've had some occasional success with some client, but I can kind of see that it was more a fluke than it was kind of pure science and pragmatic in that way. So then I started tapping into kind of the biomechanics of the body. How does the body work, and why does it do all these movements, and how does the muscles attach, and how does it move over the joints and stuff like that? And I had some additional success from there. But then I stumbled over muscle activation techniques, a concept created by Greg Roscoff in the US. And they made their education platform more available during the pandemic. So I think many of the trainers now have a lot to thank the pandemics for. For those of us who didn't go broke because of lockdowns, we didn't have a lot of lockdowns in Sweden, but for those of us who kind of survived, there's a ton of like really good educational material out there if you have the time and the money to interact with it. So I did that for a year. And MIT is basically when you look at the neuromuscular connection. So how, and that's just a fancy word of saying how well or how efficient does the muscle contract. And what he found out that I had found out years before, just couldn't really grasp what I found, was that the correlation between limitations in range of motion, how the body moves, is highly correlated to weaknesses. So that means if that tightness in the body is not a lengthening problem, but a shortening problem. And that kind of changed a lot of how I think about training and how I approach training today with just that kind of fact. So the story behind it was years ago, I had this businessman, really, really successful, come in to the gym. I wanted to put on some muscle. It was a little scrawny guy, but he was hugely into numbers. And I mean, this guy is the stiffest person I've ever met. Before and after. I mean, this guy was stiff as a brick. So he could barely touch the top of his kneecaps with his fingertips without kind of really hunching over. So I did all this foam rolling and ART and stuff for him for 10 weeks. So he paid for 10 weeks, and we had 0 results. I had nothing to show for it. And he was furious, understandably, and wanted a refund. And so after talking to him for quite a while, kind of trying to calm him down, we made an agreement that he would give me an additional 10 weeks free of charge. And that's kind of how you learn. When you start working for free, you learn. So I was sitting in my office, just I got this guy to come down and come back. But what do we need? I need to produce some kind of result. And the thing that I knew best then was strength training. So I had him deadlift from blocks. So the barbell started from the top of his knees, and we did we did 5 sets of 5, and every session we added 5 kilos, and every third session I could lower the block kind of at like 10 centimeters until after 10 weeks, he actually put on 40 kilos on the barbell and he was deadlifting from the floor. I was like flabbergasted. This just kind of went against everything I thought I knew about training and how the body works. So I knew that the strength part is like a vital component in how the body moves. I just didn't know why it was. I knew it was like that, but didn't know why. And the muscle activation technique, that they kind of explained it to me and how it works. So what you do as a practitioner is that you quickly assess the body left side to right side to see if there are any asymmetries. And as soon as you find a limitation in range of motion, you kind of know that if you find it with the leg in abduction with internal rotation, you know that the muscle that cross that kind of axis, some of those are weak. Maybe all, maybe some, maybe one. And you have these different tests. You test the muscles in its extreme range of motion, because that's where you're going to find your weakness. Close to the body, close to neutral, where the muscle is kind of in mid-range, everybody's strong all the time. Even you see the old people walking with walkers, they kind of shuffle with their feet because their body keeps the body neutral. It's the body's way to kind of protect itself from being vulnerable if there is no stability in the end ranges. So with the MAT, I could finally kind of start to fix people, getting them into the gym, because MAT, like any other manual therapy, doesn't add strength. It's kind of like with your car. If you have muscle limitations, you might be able to drive your car in the first gear. There will be a lot of reps and low speed, and sooner or later you'll blow your engine. So what MAT does is it gives you access to kind of all the gears, so you can drive your body as it's supposed to function.
So before, explain MAT from a standpoint for those who never heard of MAT, the practical. How do you actually do MAT? You have a video out there that kind of shows the palpation, or it's not necessarily a stretching or lifting. It's more of it looks like massage to me.
Yeah. And it's not, I've had that, and then they're like, oh, this doesn't feel like massage at all. It's like, I kind of not. It's not. No. So what you do is you try to reestablish, or you try to fortify or strengthen the communication between the nervous system and the muscles, and you do that with what's called the muscle spindles. The muscle spindles are small receptors that's located in between the muscle fibers in the muscle, and they react to lengthening. So when I push, or when I palpate the muscle, it lengthens, and that will activate iron, and the communication will kind of get some feedback, and it will start to fire and increase its contractible efficiency.
Is there relatedness to acupuncture? That is more. I mean, it's more. That's more from a standpoint of nerves, you know.
Yeah, it's more from nerves. So maybe a bit like dry needling, because that will also elongate the muscle. So it's all about elongating the muscle to make to just kind of fortify the signal that is sent back and forth between the nervous system and the muscle. So at first when I was introduced to it, I thought maybe not, but you can say some weird things that where you kind of palpate and you get the muscle to activate and fire and contract as it's supposed to be. It opens up limitations. So it opens up the range of motion. So people coming in, and that's kind of like the party trick I'd use when I do lectures about this, and so mobility is not a lengthening problem, it's a shortening problem. So you take somebody that's kind of tight somewhere, and you palpate, and you go from one point, and suddenly they can kind of move in a much more open direction.
So if we go back to kind of that's kind of your specialty, but from the basics though, when we're talking about, you mentioned strength, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna put a plug in on you have a really good website, so relevantstark.se or relevantstark.se. It talks about, the difference between I thought this was really interesting, workout versus training.
Yeah.
What a lot of people say, well, I'm going to go work out versus I'm going to go train, and the difference. I want to talk about that. And then also the issues when it comes to stability, flexibility, balance, and strength. So talk about that a little bit. It's not just, where I'm coming from is a lot of people focus so much time in the hockey world. They focus so much time on improving stick handling, improving shooting, improving edge work, and everything is so much done with skates or with the stick, and very little is built on how am I building my body that is going to be the main tool to use it all. And then if you break down how they build their body, it's mainly the big muscles, or they may be doing they're working perhaps in the not the most optimal way to actually build the athlete's body for hockey or for whatever sport they may be in. So let me ask you and lead you in this direction. What are the problems that you see post, or maybe with, the older junior age, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that you see are like common problems that may have started pre-puberty, post-puberty, that you can actually do something about, or maybe even correlating that with elite athletes that you see, or like this guy that you were saying, what you saw there was a very unflexible person. Yeah. So what are the problems that you see?
So your question kind of ties together. That's how I kind of use the toolbox that I have with barbell training for strength, biomechanics to just make everything function as it's supposed to, and MOT to kind of either check out that what we're doing is the correct thing, and just kind of like the test, just to see where the weaknesses, what happens when you do this, and what happens when we train it. So for me, the problem I think is that there is it's a lot of either or. It's a lot of either or, and in a group setting. So either you have these barbell freaks that that's the only thing that we're going to do, or everything is just about conditioning, or everything is just about agility or speed, instead of kind of looking at what every individual needs. So my take on hockey is based on the pragmatic experience that I have. So I got this guy coming in to my office about 4 years ago. He and I, he's the longest relationship I had working with one hockey player. And this guy he had a 130 squat, he had a 140 deadlift, he had a 50 kilo press overhead, he had I think he had a 75 kilo bench and a 95 kilo clean. And the way I handled it back then was just classic. We need to get you strong. So the first thing I noticed is that he had no idea what he was doing. He was squatting, he was just pulling the bar with everything he had. And so the first thing we had to do is just treat him proper mechanics. So why do we lift? How do we lift? What happens with your body when you lift? How are you constituted? Do you have a long torso, short legs? So I used the analogy for him, as I do with every other player that I have. I'm 183 centimeters. My wife is 170. When I step into her car, I can't reach the pedals, but I bang my head in the ceiling. So even though she's 1.5 decimeters shorter than I am, her legs are like enormously long. So come to say a deadlift, the mechanics will be totally different. My hip will be much more open in angle-wise in a deadlift than hers. Hers will be much more closed. And these guys, when they have a group setting, what do they do when they're unsure? They look at the other guys. And number one, you know that the other guy is doing the proper thing. No, you don't. And does he look like you? Probably not. So I think that a lot of coaches, and from a young age, we need to see ourselves as more as teachers than coaches. We don't need drill sergeants. We need teachers, because they need to be taught proper lifting techniques. And when you do that, you will see if weird things happen. If they start to buckle in their knee, if they start to turn and twist with their back, if they hunch over, whatever. And with the proper tool case there, you can kind of spot and analyze and see what they need. And that's where the kind of the small things come in with the biomechanics.
So let me interject with this, because I this just was a conversation I had yesterday here in the U.S. The common feedback that scouts and agents have about Swedish players coming to the U.S. We're right in the middle of the NHL combine. So the draft is coming up, and the juniors or the young, they may still be in juniors, they may be playing the SHL, but the common thing is smart, great people, skilled, but they're coming. They have two problems: they're not strong, and they don't know how to compete. Well, your part may not be able to address the compete issue in relation to the Canadian or the U.S. player, but the strength part, So what is your opinion of, when you're talking about the teachers versus coaches? What is the level of, I'm not saying this in a critical way, but what's your opinion on the level of competency among strength coaches, or just coaches in general, in Swedish Hockey Federation or Swedish hockey organizations? I'm sure it's lacking, right? But
yeah, it is. I'm not particularly impressed, not having seen everybody, but there is a couple of really good ones. Frölunda has one in Perra Hedlund. We had Stefan Thomson in Skellefteå a couple of years ago that did an enormously good work with those people, and I've learned a lot from those two. But I think if the strength issue is, I think that correlates over to the competitiveness. I mean, building strength builds resilience, both mentally and in the body. I mean, racking off a weight on your back that feels like it's going to crush you, and then kind of squatting down, hoping to get up again. I mean, that will build some minerals in you, definitely. That will produce some mental toughness, as it is. So what I come across is that a lot of the guys don't know what they are doing. They don't know what they're trying to achieve, and they don't know why they're doing it.
All right. So let me, I'm sorry, but I have to, because you mentioned this on your website too, and I was going to talk about goal setting and setting goals. I think, is that kind of what you're talking about too, is they don't know where they are and where they're going?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
And I think that is the big question when it comes to building hockey players, is why. So why do we train them in the gym? Why not just go on the ice? What does the gym do for them? And what are we trying to achieve when we do it? So first of all, you need to kind of look at hockey as a sport. What kind of sport is it? For me, it's a contact sport. More or less, it's just contact. So instead of kind of looking at what transfer to ice or to the specific sport, my way to look at it is, how do we get them to survive practice, games, lives, tackles, everything that kind of revolves around ice hockey? How do we get them to survive that? How do we get them to practice when they need to practice, go to every game, never miss a game? So, I mean, the best ability any athlete can have is availability. So the general strength foundation for players should be the main thing to focus on from quite an early age, even though it's hard to have. If you have like 20, 13-year-olds, teaching everybody to do proper barbell squats is hard, but there's a lot of other things that's also hard that we manage. So it's all about solutions and trying to solve it with the hand that you kind of dealt. But I think that we need to focus a lot more on the basic foundational strength from an early age. And when you have that, when you are resilient and robust enough, then we can kind of look at your specific role in the team and what your weaknesses are. So if we define strength, I use the Latin words in my on my website just to appear a bit smarter than I really am. But I chose recte fortius for a reason. It's translated to correct strength. Because if you're the guy that can squat double body weight, but jumping on one leg tweaks your back, then I'm sorry, you're not strong. No, you're not strong at all. You can be rigid and compact in a setting where you're going to do one thing, and you're going to squat down, you're going to stand up again. But these kids, they need to be really strong in every angle. And that's where, if you look at somebody who cannot pronate their foot, so the arch of the foot cannot come down, then they will lack internal rotation of the leg. If there's no internal rotation in the leg, there is no internal rotation of the hip. That means when you squat down, you will fall forward, arch your back, and your knees will probably buckle. Then you know you have a problem. What happens when the same kid skates? Since he can't internally rotate when the skate hits the ice, he'll just lean forward, arch his back. That takes muscle power away from the glutes and adds them to the back. Hence, we could have a back problem on our hands. And coming back to the hockey player that I've been with for 4 years, that is what happened. We made him super strong. I mean, he went from 130 to 180 in squat, 140 to 200 in deadlift, benched over 100, and so on and so forth. Still, he'll tweak his back like 3 or 4 times every season, missing 5, 6, 7 games. Then you're not strong. So I had to go back to the drawing board and kind of look at, okay, what are we going to do? By then, the first 2 years he was playing, he wasn't playing around here, but then he moved back and played for a local team. So now I can see him every week. So we did MAT every week, and you could see every week he came in with internal rotation on the right side in his right hip. Shit. So we started working with his foot and his hip. And last season he played every game, came to every practice, and he didn't tweak his back once. So there's a difference between being strong and being proper strong. So proper strong is like where you can handle what hockey is throwing at you. And being super strong, where you have a double body weight bench press, is cool on the beach, but not on the rink.
So how does that correlate then with kind of what you're also talking about, which is strength is really about power, explosivity, and stability, right? So when I'm thinking about hockey, when you're saying it's a contact sport, totally agree. And it's also it's a one-on-one game, really, right? And it's also a game of starts and stops.
Yeah.
And not, I mean, you see a lot of players that have one speed, and they are fast when they get their they're more like a long distance skier, that can skate a long time, and they can glide, and they got a beautiful stride, and they can, but the successful hockey player is the person that is extremely explosive in its starts and stops in different angles, and not in big flow drills.
Absolutely. And when you look at that, you can take now we start to kind of look at like plyometric training.
Yep.
And if you look at the guys that are really good at plyometric training, they have a definition that is really important, I think, for most hockey coaches. So if you have ground contact between 0.1 second and 0.25, that's called speed strength. It's all about speed and being strong enough to be that fast. But when you exceed 0.25 and go upwards, that's strength speed. So it's more strength than it is speed, actually. And the average ground ice contact with skates is 0.35, 0.40. So you need to kind of load the body accordingly when you do your plyometric work, for one. So, and that kind of indicates also that strength might be more useful in a skating environment than in a running environment, for example. So you need to kind of look at those parameters and see what does the kid in front of me need in that. And then you have the biomechanics part. Does his feet work? Does his hip work? Does his shoulder work as they should? Is he able to get everything out? And the last thing that I think that many hockey coaches, from my experience, there are a lot more than I have met. If you want to be a quick skater, if you want to accelerate quickly on skates, that's what you need to practice. So do they practice that? And do it enough? So we can only do so much in the gym, and then it needs to be kind of trained or practiced at. Skating fast is a skill more than it's a physical kind of output. Even though it's both, you need to be strong enough to be fast enough. But it's a skill more than it is a strength feature.
So I wrote down one of my notes here. Common problems the players learn too late, or is it too late?
It's not too late.
So what you're saying, so everybody can have gains. So if your flexibility is crap, you can improve it if you acknowledge that you got the deficit, put a plan in place to address it.
Yeah, most definitely. I've had 65-year-old academics coming in here looking like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and we fixed them up. It took time, but these guys that we are talking about, these are like prime human specimens when it comes to physical performance. They will adapt to just about anything, or they won't be hockey players at that age.
Yeah. What about, so you also mentioned that and I heard this when I was talking to Dag Wenström about, one of the things he talked about it was actually a couple of episodes ago, and that's the problem of group training versus individual training. I get it. It's hard. We have limited resources. We have to do group training, but I think that it puts the emphasis on, if you just rely on group training, you're probably not going to optimize. So how do you find that balance? Because in a hockey team, you may only you got a part-time, strength coach that may have multiple teams. And we've got this team of, let's say 20 players, 25 players that I'm working with, and we're probably going to do some type of circuit training.
Yeah.
So how would you address your player? Take the J20 player that is going into a team that that they're going to have so many on ice practices, they're going to have the strength part before their training. Do you augment a individual plan within the group, or do you say do the group thing but add your individual things to augment that?
Yeah. First of all, I really never got why they go into the gym before ice. I've never understood that. That's, for me, that's ridiculous. The main event is always hockey. So if there is nothing left for the strength training, we really don't care. It is what it is. They got what they got, and it is what it is. But going in and leaving some gains on the floor of the gym instead of getting those in the ice, I actually never got that. And when I work with hockey players, I try to change that, and they just won't have it. And for me, that's super weird, like really, really weird. Because we all, if we look at training there's kind of like some rules that we need to abide to. And power training is like, you start with power training, then you do the strength training, because the power training is speed and strength, and the strength training is just kind of just strength. So you do that first, and the same thing goes here. So what if you can squat high number, or you kind of push yourself to the limit with on the assault bike or whatever you want to do in the gym? You want to exceed it on the ice. If none of these guys had to go to the gym, I mean, half of them wouldn't go. If they could survive, if they could make it anyways, they would. So there need to be a point to why we go to the gym, and they need to kind of understand why they are going there. And we need to, and the hockey community needs to kind of get their priorities. What is important? Is it the gym or the ice?
So let's say that, all right, you can't change the schedule. What you can schedule, what you can do is, while I'm there, instead of focusing on doing heavy squats, maybe I'll do more flexibility and these type of things before my ice session. Is that?
Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, it could be that. It kind of depends on what you want to do and when in the season. I mean, if you're off season, then we'll go all in on the gym, and if it's a preseason, I think tapering would be a good idea. So probably less, a lot of heavy lifting, but a lot of, but kind of zero volume. So just a couple of heavy lifts just to get the body walking, and then focus on what you're going to do on the ice. But if we look at the group versus the individual setting, it kind of, I mean, it's like you said, it comes down to time and money. How much money do you have, and how much time do you have? So if we look at what I do, like what I think is my best version of it. So I teach the players how to lift. I teach them how to understand their lifting and their own bodies, so they can half and half kind of coach themselves.
Yep.
And look at the gym as with the ice. I mean, most of the time they're alone.
Yes.
Most of the time there is no coach to say you need to do this. The coach steps in when there is a conundrum that needs to be solved. You're not getting this, so you need to go this, and they explain to them. And the same goes with the gym. So if you have these guys that are starting to think about some of the anatomy, some of the muscle functions, and what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, they can actually coach themselves. And when my athletes train on their own, they film themselves. And I have this platform where they load up the videos, so that when they open their app, these are the exercises you're going to do. These are the reps and sets. These are the how much weight you're gonna lift, and this is the rest in between sets. And that's a set time that I'm in charge of, not them.
And that's true coach that you're talking about there, right?
I use coach, and every exercise have a short instructional film if they forget what they want to do or they just want to refresh. So if we want to do it like the thorough way, as I do it, I watch every lift and I give them feedback, either written feedback, or I do a movie, a film clip about what they're doing wrong and how they should correct it, or just drawing on a picture, on a photo, or whatever. But if I have a lot of hockey players, I could just kind of watch them, take notes on what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about on the next session we're going to meet up. So I think you need to kind of see the individual in it, because we have a responsibility, especially the junior hockey players, for them to be able to continue to play hockey, not for as long as the body will do, but for as long as they want to.
Yeah. Let me ask you if you had pixie dust, you can do whatever you want to. A typical junior team has 14 practices per week. Yeah. So hockey gymnasium, or let's say J18, J20. So this is typically going to be within a hockey gymnasium. 4 practices as a team in the evenings per week, 2 games per week, and they typically have 2 to 3 on ice skills practices per week with a skills coach. And then they probably have 4 times a week in the gym somehow in combination with either as a team or individual. How would you, is that a good balance? Is that sufficient? Is it insufficient? Is it out of balance when it comes to working on the off-ice portion?
Kind of depends what you do in the off-ice portion, but it's a lot of practice. And I sometimes when I talk to people about this, we tend to forget that hockey practice also is training.
Yeah,
that will fatigue the guys and girls, for that matter, a lot, and we need to take that into consideration. If there's sufficient rest, is there sufficient sleep, are they eating enough, and so on and so forth. And even, I mean, if these guys are 16, 17, some of them might still be growing. So if somebody has a growth spurt during a year for 10 centimeters, that's going to do that's going to have a big impact. So I would look at how they move, and in the gym we would work on if there was stuff that didn't move as they should. And I will take, since they're already training so much, and if the summer training didn't do it, I mean, for me, then it's too late. We have what we have, and we'll work with that. It's really hard trying to make gains, even though many of these boys are kind of dipped in testosterone, going through puberty. They can handle a lot of load and a lot of fatigue and a lot of practice. Still would be careful, because my experience is that many of them are suffering from knee pain, back pain, and shoulder pain. Shoulder pain, not so much, more hip pain. I would address those things in the gym, and we could use a lot of that time schooling them, if they are not schooled prior to that, in the lifting mechanics.
So what you're saying is, if they're training, if they're on the ice, whether they're doing 2 skills, 4 team practices, there's a lot of endurance, there's a lot of muscle fatigue within those sessions, and you get really, really tired as a body, right? So maybe not going on the bike for 30 minutes during that off-ice time, but maybe what you need to be doing is mobility, stretching in parts of that, and then use maybe some of that time to work on explosive strength, rather than more another 60 minutes of heavy load.
Yeah, I wouldn't do another 60 minutes of heavy load at all. So but I will do. I mean, kind of like what you said now. So I would look at. I mean, first and foremost, what we need to have these people on the ice.
Yes.
I don't really care how strong they are, how fast they are, and how conditioned they are if they are not playing. If they have bad knees or injured backs or hips, so that needs to be the priority. You need to kind of analyze all of these kids. What is the problem? What are they doing? And maybe they're not doing anything wrong. Maybe they're just growing. So maybe you should kind of focus on what they need to focus. I listened to this interview with one of the academic chief of the academy of, I think it was Tottenham or Arsenal, where they measure every kid twice a year to see how much they grow. And if they go through a growth spurt or they're in pain, they kind of just focus on getting them on the pitch for the game, because that's the most important thing, getting that kind of quality of the play. So I think we have during season, off season, and we work on all that stuff. We get them strong, robust, resilient. If there is time over, we'll focus on power and conditioning. If there is not, there will be power and conditioning drills on the ice. And doing preseason, kind of just taper on the gym, getting the last bits and pieces together, and then start to get conditioning them on the ice and getting that coordination back. Because adding muscle mass during off season with not going on the ice, that will kind of ruin your kind of coordination a bit. So we need to kind of restore that. If we could have ice time during off season, that would be the best. But most clubs don't have that option. And then when we then go into the in-season, then we need to work on all the small things that doesn't drain the kids that much, because injuries. I mean, the easiest way for a player never to play hockey again is just blow out his knee or whatever, and we don't want that.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of check out that all the muscles are there and they're working as they should. And if you don't have a solid battery of tests, that could be really, really hard. So the first kind of group of hockey players that I worked with, they all had one. Some of them, a lot of them had one feature that they had in common. Everybody hunched over when they were supposed to deadlift. They couldn't extend the lower back properly. So my logic to that was, needs to be a stiff hamstring. So probably hamstring is weak. So we need to train the hamstring, since there is no overstride in skating as there is in running. The hamstring is not elongated under force, hence it will become weak. So we did that, and absolutely nothing happened. It was just an utter waste of time. So when I had the skill set from MIT to actually test them, what they did have in common is that hip flexors were weak. So for them to not be able to extend their back was actually them not being able to shorten their hip flexors enough. So when you have those kind of abilities to test your theories, then you can look at every individual player. And I think if you have a group of 20 people, you will have like 5 groups or maybe 6 groups that have just like the biggest parts in common. So you need to do 5 sessions, not 25 programs with them. And so for me, it kind of comes down to skill set and being able to analyze what movements you're seeing.
So how do you, let's take a new player comes to you. How long does it take for you to analyze, and what are the ways that you analyze? How long can you do that in one session?
Yeah, you see quite quickly if there is something weird happening. If you do a complex lift like the deadlift or the squat, you'll see quite immediately if there is something that doesn't work. You can see the foot invert or evert. You can see knees kind of go wobbling all over the place, or having hard time kind of rotating the hip or over rotating the hip, or being just stiff in the chest or whatever. And then you know that.
But let's say if you're working with a player from Umeå,
yeah,
it's a little tough to get that player from Umeå down to Helsingborg. For those who I'm using to the geographical distance of Sweden being a very, very tall, long country, and it's far distance between, and they may not have the means of flying down to Helsingborg. Can you do this remotely, or it's harder?
Yeah.
You can't do the MAT, but you can analyze what they're doing in the gym.
Yeah, that's where the biomechanics comes in. I've done a lot of work for guys like Jerry Ward and David Gray that do a lot of things. They call it closed chain mechanics. That means what happens with the body when the foot is on the ground. And so we can work. So if you look, I can do sessions like we're doing now on Zoom or on FaceTime or whatever, and just follow them into the gym like that. I mean, it's not like having them here, but
yeah. And you can't do the MAT that way at all.
But I can see how their feet moves and how their hip move, and we can do exercises that kind of strengthen those parts. So as I said before, manual therapy will not build strength. They will just enable you to go to the gym, or kind of just alleviate some pain or take down some inflammation or whatever. So manual therapy is like that, is for that, and testing that what you're doing actually works.
Yeah.
But the stuff we do in the gym is what makes the difference.
So kind of this super interesting to me, and we talked a little bit offline about so we're in the draft NHL combine right now, and I think I saw that in 2013. So for 10 years they've been using specific testing during the combines, and it's always controversial. We see right now everybody's posting Connor Bedard's the stuff that he's doing and how many pull-ups he can do, it's pretty impressive because he's a phenomenal athlete.
Absolutely.
And he's the best player in juniors in the world, and he's going to be the number 1 draft pick. But what are some of the problems that you see if you're a GM? Are those tests the right test to be able to bank on whether or not this is going to be a good player? Or would you say, okay, it's a test, but we're going to do something completely different?
I think it's a test, and it kind of depends. So the point and the problem you have with testing a lot of people over a short period of time is there need to be kind of an overall test where you can kind of draw some kind of conclusion, but
it needs to be pretty simple.
It needs to be quick and simple. So absolutely. So depending on kind of what you draw for, what kind of conclusions you draw from that, or what you do with that, it could be good, and it could also be really bad. I've seen players that are shit in the gym that are really good on the ice, and vice versa. So you can't really tell anything from those tests more than they have a certain standard in their athleticism. And we have, those people are freaks. We need to remember that those are genetic freaks. The things they can do, us mere mortals cannot, and they will adapt to just about anything. So you can. That's why you see all this. LeBron James has a shitty program. Everybody, some Wayne Gretzky benched no more than 65 kilos or whatever. Yeah, but you're not Wayne Gretzky, so go to the gym. So
I think Elias Pettersson, when he was on the combine, he couldn't do 1 pull-up.
No, and
and he's got one of the hardest shots out there.
Yeah, so he's done quite all right for himself. So we're not, but we can't measure with the anomalies like the last percentile. We need to kind of look at what we have in front of us and what we need to do with those people. Kind of depending on what you're looking for.
So let's wrap up with this, because I do think that it's I think an important part though is that you have, there is value to analyze that individual through whatever tests that you do, and to be able to have a baseline of where you are, what your deficiencies are, so you can then put a goal in place of and then a strategy to work on it, right?
Absolutely. So you see, everybody needs to kind of get their own battery of tests, and the way I test people is when I put them on the table, I can test. I can test about 65 muscles in about 2 minutes, so I can kind of see where there's limitations, and from that limitation, we can kind of just search on from there and see where we end up with that specific player. We can't have them on the table. We can do some kind of complex movement like squats or deadlifts, and see if anything kind of looks weird, just to make quick tests of if we are online with a big distance.
Interesting stuff. So I've already mentioned your website, relevantstark.se. What's the best way? You're on LinkedIn. What's the best way for people to see your stuff? If people are interested in coming for an assessment or start training, how do they best get in touch with you, other than through this media? But
so you can find me on. I have 2 Instagram accounts, relevantstark, and then I have my name, Joacim Theander, on Instagram, and then LinkedIn is my name, of course, Joacim Theander, and I have a Facebook page that is also my name, Joacim Theander. I started writing on those, and then that kind of spiraled away, and now I can't leave them because they've got all the information. So that you can find me there if you want to get in touch. So the biggest thing for me is, but it's the most pushback I get is when it comes to mobility and stability work. that people really want it to be a lengthening problem when it actually is a shortening problem when it comes to mobility. So you're not stiff because you're stiff. You're stiff because your muscles are not able to move you into that position that you desire it to do. And we need to fix that in order for you to function as you should.
Yeah. Great stuff. The reason I wanted to have you on was exactly this, to be able to point out, this podcast is about inform and educate. It didn't necessarily have anything to do with Swedish junior hockey players in specifically, but it's more about hockey players. And I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of highlight this for people out there that are either parents or coaches or players, that this is an important area, and hopefully it hit the mark when it comes to inform and educate, and hopefully also entertain a little bit as well.
Absolutely. So, and I think what we need to do in the community is we need to leave the value-based training. How you huff and how you puff and if you puke in the parking lot is not an indicator of good training. Good training is good training, where every kind of workout kind of builds on the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's result-driven. We need to work a lot more with that. I see a lot of junior kids, they would just work them to the ground, because they don't want to be outworked by anybody else. And I'm not worried about being outworked. I'm worried about being outspotted by other coaches.
Yeah.
So less value-based training and more result-driven.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for coming on. We'll be in touch. And hopefully we can also, as we mentioned before, we got a partnership with Target Aid. So I'm going to get with you about kind of a cause that you feel strongly about, and we'll attach that somehow. Really bad with this right now, but we're just getting started, so we'll find a way to kind of highlight your charitable cause or your thing through Target Aid. So want to thank them for being a partner with the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast.
Absolutely. So,
thanks a bunch.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really great.